I'll try not to keep you too long and keep these presentations as sweet as possible. So I'm going to talk about public sector BIM adoption in Ireland, where it is at the moment. Compared to 22 months ago when the BIM mandate came in first, we're a long way on, and I feel we're a lot further on in the industry than we are. Part of that journey was a lot of hard lessons learned from everybody. BIM was not something that you could flick a switch and it would come on overnight. But I suppose the introduction really to what has driven the BIM in Ireland is public works procurement and the capital works management framework. 2014 we did a study. It showed that we were very lacking in the quality of documentation that was going out to procurement. So when we looked at what the possible solutions were to resolve that issue, we looked at BIM, and BIM will not only resolve the issues with procurement documentation, it helps manage the entire data sets that's involved in taking a project from cradle to grave. As I said, there was a position paper then was produced in 2017 where government were in agreement that BIM could help us out. And in November 2021, Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform at the time, they appointed an agency, the Build Digital Alliance. It was led by TU Dublin, and they were to set out plans to gather momentum and adopt digital transition in the construction sector, and it was called the Build Digital Project. We've partnered with them, and we've absolutely rallied in the last 22 months, published a lot of really good information. So I suggest that anyone here, if you're starting your BIM journey, there's a huge resource behind the Build Digital Project on their web portal. How were we going to do it? We had to impose standards, and we had to impose standards on CWMF. There was somebody, I can't remember, a long time ago, explained what does imposing standards on a process mean. And the simple way he explained it was 20 years ago when he went to book a holiday, he had to go down and meet a travel agent, sit down, discuss where he was going to go, what he could afford to do, how he was going to get there, where is he going to stay, how is he going to travel around when he was there. You can do it online now in an hour. That was because the travel industry imposed standards on how information was shared between car rental companies, between flight companies, between hotel companies. So it meant that the information that was being given from one to the other was the same information, but it meant something different to each of the companies so they could make arrangements and book it. And that's why standards are going to drive our industry forward, and the standards will become the norm in the near future. So our BIM requirements came into effect on the 1st of January 2024, and it was on the large scale projects over 100 million. The reason for that was we felt that the projects over 100 million already had the skill sets for people to be able to manage complex data and processes. And lastly, early on last year, I went into our head department and said, we have a problem with BIM. People are worrying about the cost. How is it going to be done? So now on all public works projects, the cost of BIM is built into the capital asset. So when they make their acquisition for funding to develop a new school or a new hospital or whatever, they have to include their BIM costs. And it's mandatory. There's no getting away from it. It's potentially have funding pulled from a project if BIM is not included in it now. So anyone that's in any doubt that this is never going to get huge traction on public sector projects, in 26 months' time, BIM will be required on every level of project. So you need to get on board in the digital journey. This is roughly where we are now. It's just kind of a graphic. It kind of reads a little bit better. A little bit of help from one of my ex-colleagues in the Department of Education with this. I stole some of his ideas. See Alan that's down there. And I think it kind of helps us understand, where we are in the journey. And if you look at this arrow, the big meaty piece is coming up next. This is where projects are going to start evolving in that are less than or greater than 5 million in value. At the moment, projects over 10 million in value is required, and the contractors are going to be coming on board in January this year for projects of that scale. And very quickly then it'll go through 5 million, 1 million, and then everything below 1 million. So every project that's funded by 50% or more by the state, that's what requires CWMF, and that is the adoption timeline. So again, it's just, this will continue until January 2028, and that's when we'll have everything fully integrated. So moving on from that, I kind of looked at, people often ask me, well, what kind of projects does it affect? This was just a snapshot I took from 2024. And if you look, there was 1,652 projects delivered by the state in 2024. The project financial bands for 2024. Now, obviously, some of the larger projects didn't appear on the database that I have, but it kind of goes up to about 5 million plus. So still a lot of projects and a lot of works. Like the state are the biggest employer on the construction sector in Ireland. Regardless of what anyone tells you, the larger projects might have a higher value, but when you go down into the smaller nuts and bolts of projects below €1 million, 63% of those projects are roughly below €1 million. So the number of people involved in the smaller projects far outweighs the number of people that's involved in the larger projects. So it's really essential that the SMEs get on board, join in all of the groups, the BIM groups that we have, put themselves forward to help themselves understand how they can make the transition as effectively as possible. And it will also inform them what they need to do. So again, these are just some projects that we have now. This was what I was faced with when I looked at how am I going to come up with a solution to address all the issues we have in the construction sector. And this is based around public works contracts. We have the national infrastructure guidelines, which regularly change, and they don't tell us about the changes till they've published them. I'm a civil servant. I have to deal with all this too. We have the capital works management framework. Currently has 5 stages. Those stages need to be elongated in order to break up information into silos, so that information can be used as a decision gate to move to the next stage. Too often we see people jump in at stage 1A and they have forgotten to do their sort of homework about the project. And eventually that homework will catch up on them and lead to issues and delays on sites. So you have a whole load of interactions on a project. Now this is kind of based on generic project, but on a typical project, you could actually have 6 interactions with e-tenders for one project, one construction project. By the time you procure professionals, by the time you procure contractors, subcontractors, so it's not a simple process. Why are we reinventing the wheel every time that we're going to do it? We need a platform that's able to hold this information and release it to you as you need it, when it's needed in the project lifecycle. And that is something we're working on. So when I looked at all of that, BIM is a really good way of managing that information, because BIM is really information management. It's not necessarily all about the models. It's about information management. And it doesn't matter whether that information has a 3D concept to it or whether it's just a list of tasks that has to be done. It's data, and BIM is a great way of managing it. Now, currently in the CWMF, I'm going to go through this very quickly because it bores myself when I have to do it. So currently there's 5 stages, there's 11 contracts, 20 model forms, arbitration rules, 8 ITTs, 4 forms of tenders, 4 conditions of engagement, 4 information to tenderers, 6 consultancy model forms, consultancy arbitration rules, 6 SAQs, 19 appendices and 10 supplements. There's 27 guidance notes, and those guidance notes are somewhere on my last count between 2,500 to 3,500 pages, which nobody reads anymore. And we've one glossary that covers all of that. Our plan is to digitalize that entire system. So when you log on with information, it's going to hold your data sets where the decision points are on the procurement statement. And you will be able to utilize and be able to benefit from the forms that it will generate for you to tell you what your next steps are. That's something we're hoping to develop in the next couple of years. I have a pilot project which hopefully I'll be launching next week, and I'll talk more about that later on. But that was the mindset I was left with. So how are we going to do it? There's two aspects to the strategy. First aspect is imposing mandatory standards across information on all stages of the project lifecycle. So, and that's training. I can't emphasize this enough. I see so many SMEs coming to worry about how much BIM is going to cost me, how much is this going to cost me, it's actually not going to cost you anything to look at what you have at the moment. And when you actually start looking at what you have, you probably have a lot of the BIM tools you already need to commence your journey within your organization, but you need to train your staff on how to manage your information differently. That's what we're asking them to do. And that has to be driven by the client. So any CEOs of SMEs and the likes that are here, take these valuable pieces of information that I'm trying to give to you today. You need a training plan. You need to look at your training plan. If they're not trained, you're going to end up in a disastrous situation. And the aspect too is obviously on the public service side, we need to support our public bodies in implementing the BIM process. So we ran a series of master classes. These were specifically geared at the clients, because what I deduced from talking to people in the industry and in the sector was clients were asking for BIM, but they really weren't describing what they were asking for. And that seems to be a big hang up for everybody, where people are not sure about what does that mean. And they were saying BIM is coming in very expensive. Of course it is, because you didn't tell them, you didn't qualify what you wanted to get on your BIM things. So we ran some master classes on that. They were completed, and any civil or public servants that are here, they're available on the One Learning portal and the OGP web platform. And Build Digital then ran information management webinars, 3 of them completed. Again, those resources are available on the Build Digital website. And the public sector BIM group we have is active. So what's that? The public sector BIM group there's about 144 members in it. So there's architects, engineers, technicians, management, people that work in the public sector who are trying to adopt BIM within their organizations. We meet a couple of times a year. I get my ears bashed as to what the problems are trying to implement it within an organization. I take that ear bashing back and see if I can help resolve it, or put resources in place to help resolve it. And I'm not getting as much of an ear bashing now, because people are actually realizing that this is here to stay. So now I'm getting very constructive feedback. How do we do this? Why do I have to do this? It's like, how do I do it? And it's really good from that point of view. And again, the implementation strategy, the first aspect, 4 real drivers on the BIM mandate. And it's the 19650 series of ISO standards. And they are all about information management. On their own, they are not BIM. They're about managing information. And they're going to be imposed they are imposed on the CWMF for any public works project. Secondly, then we had to look at, well, we need a classification system that's able to link up engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, site engineers, construction companies, product manufacturers. So we're using Uniclass. And Uniclass, one of the main reasons it was selected was Uniclass is universal and it's adaptable. So if you don't have a code for something that you're trying to develop in a data set, you can contact Uniclass, give them the detail about what you want to do, and if they don't already have a code for it, they will make a new one for you. It's a really good system. Then in order to share data sets, we need to be looking at IFC modeling. And again, this is to be further developed, but it is mandatory. These things are mandatory. They're not something that you can tick the box and say, yeah, we're doing it. You actually have to put these into your data sets. And lastly, there's the ICMS, and this was brought in to manage cost. It's replacing the national building elements. We saw how elements of buildings are described now have to comply with ICMS. And again, this is mandatory. So the QS is out there need to be looking at this. It is no longer acceptable to present cost control reports in any other format unless they're in ICMS work, a really key takeaway today. Again, this was more or less targeting on our clients about setting information requirements for all stages of the project lifecycle. So what deliverables, what information, when do you want it, and what do you want it to look like? And the appointing party or the contract authority, and again, this is BIM terminology from the ISO standards. You know, we would normally call these people the client, but you know, the appointing party or the contract authority must specify the level of BIM required for each information requirement, and that's in the BIM needs and requirements. Failing to do that piece is where most people fail. They've looked for too much information too early on in the project, and the costs of BIM go through the roof. You know, you get as much information as you want from a consultant, but you have to kind of tell them what you want in the first instance. And if you limit that to what you want and limit it to what stage of the project you're at, you'll be on a very good path to understanding how BIM needs and requirements work. And again, this is just a graphic kind of explaining what the four main requirements of the mandate are. I'm not going to go into all these. They're kind of self-explanatory. We'll tour and provide slides for BIM Gathering today, and these have been included. So the second aspect, supporting the public bodies, as I said, we've had a series of master classes. We are looking at trying to develop, or the need to develop, a protocol for use in Ireland. It has been a concern from some organisations as to contractually how BIM will be implemented. My own personal feeling will be it will either be by protocol or it will be by an addendum to the existing contracts. So you basically you can have an appendix to a contract that will make BIM contractually requirement, which is very different to legal requirement. So in developing our strategy, we've developed 3 contract BIM execution plan templates, post-contract BIM execution templates. We would love people to be able to use these. Like they're all available on the Build Digital website. And we would also love people to come back to us with feedback after they've used them. So if we can help develop these even further to make the documents more usable in the entire industry, and it's not just on public works projects, these documents can be used in the private sector as well. So at the moment, we have a great collaboration between ourselves and Build Digital, that's Speaker where I work, and Build Digital, and also the NSAI, that was here earlier on. That collaboration of those 3 groups have really helped, I suppose, shape how the digital transition is moving forward. And again, on the Build Digital website, we have EIRs, we have OIRs, AIMs, PIRs. There's actually more information up there now, but it's not included on this. There's also training, and there's over 300 courses available on Build Digital website and the DASB database for training. So whether you're an administration person in an organisation or a CEO, there is training that is available for you. It can be done online, going up to the DASB dashboard, but help you understand more about what you need to bring to your organisation to help develop your BIM, your BIM journey. And then we have the NSAI has 19650 certification scheme on at the moment. I think they're parts 1 and 2 at the moment, and they're developing certification for the entire suite. Now again, I would suggest people may keep an eye on the ISO 19650 because it's going to change next year. There's some changes coming. I don't think the content is going to change a whole lot dramatically. It might be just streamlining, which is what I believe is happening. And again, this is kind of an overview of what happens in the background that industry probably wouldn't see, who we talk to when I'm not here at these presentations, giving speeches. So, you know, we have a massive network, and the network is bi-directional. So the feedback, as we go out looking for help or looking for people to engage, we take on board what they say, we take it back. And between the 3 people that are involved in the 3 red slots there, we tend to try and and resolve the issues that people are facing trying to implement BIM on the ground. And of course, we talk to all our other partners as well. It's not just people on the ground. We have to try and keep everybody with some sort of a smile on their face. And again, something that we brought out last year was the standards packs for BIM. So for any SMEs, these will be of significant interest. The standard pack A is all really about setting your company up to get ready to adopt BIM. And then the standard pack B is when you're at your first job, you need to know what standards you need to be applying. There are the standards there. Now, in fairness, NSAI have given a 30% discount on pack A, and I think it works out about 23% on pack B. And they've done that all for robots. We're not making anything on providing those standards for you. And I think it's a really good incentive. So the email is up there. If you want to the NSAI website, you can shop here and see they're there for anyone. And again, this is something I sort of put together myself in, how do you get the non-BIM to BIM? Without sort of getting into all the details of, what your level of detail is, and what your AIM has, or your PIM has, or your AIM has. Realistically, this is no different than taking on any other project in your organization. You need to have somebody that understands how information is managed. Step one is getting information. Step two, you need to develop and plan how you're going to implement your standards across your practice. Step three is you need to look at the software and hardware you already have, and then you need to look at, do I need to upgrade it? Does it need to be better? Step four, you need to set your goals. Step five, you need to choose a really good team. And step six is training, which I talked about earlier on. Step seven, you need to monitor, adjust, and evaluate. You will not get everything right the first time around on BIM, guaranteed. I think I was about 3 projects in on BIM before I actually realized half the stuff I was doing wrong. So it's about starting the journey. But as soon as you get the wins, as the guys talked about earlier on, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for the next project. If you have a system set up, use the system you set up. And on part of the new standards, there is a requirement in it to evaluate. So you can't avoid that from now on. And again, these are just further broken down into what each of those are. I'm not going to bore you with tears going through all of those. But as I said, the slides will be available so you can see what kind of things you need to be looking at for each of those 7 steps. And there eventually. Okay, so this digitalization project I mentioned earlier on, we're hoping to digitalize the suitability assessment questionnaires, 25 integrated documents and sequence. I suppose when I looked at this project first, I was saying, this will be simple to do. 25 documents are integrated, which was 11 contracts. There's somewhere in around 297 decision gates that will depend on which one you use. So it's a lot more complex than I thought. But we have it fully digitalized now, be on an online platform. There'll be a client passport. So if you're working in a large organization, you will be able to put your details of your organization in. So any form that you have to fill in, all of the manual paperwork is done. You only need to concentrate on what what requirements you have. Bidders are the very same, so it will learn from previous projects. It will take information that they've used on previous tenders and auto-populate for them. You enter only one principle. It has a submission validation, so if you try to make a submission and something is not right on it, it will not let you make the submission of it. It will tell you invalid submission. And it will inform the plan that we have to digitalize the entire suite of CWMF documents. And again, that's being done. Don't forget to fill the digital survey. My snapshot of the one I've completed is gone down there. This really informs the industry of where we stand. And it's a crucial piece of work. So I would suggest anyone here that has any role to play in projects in Ireland, either public or private sector, go on and fill that in. And if you can't fill it all in, fill in as much of it as you can. Thank you very much.